Welcome to this edition of Chakmah Choter. On the YAHOWAH blog, I'm your host, Craig Winn. Before we return to Devarim and Deuteronomy 18, I would like to lodge a complaint. I was sanctioned twice today, once on X, the other on Facebook. And so my complaint is against Elon Musk, that we're live streaming this program on X, and also against Mark Zuckerberg, because we are also streaming this program live on Facebook. Let's start with X. I wrote a post on X that said that there is a much better solution to stop the Islamic assault against Israel and to combat Islamic terrorism than the IDF's use of bombs. And that was to come to understand the embarrassing nature of the Knight's Journey, which is Muhammad's wild-ass ride in his dreams into Jerusalem, where he claims he visited the non-existent temple, and that on his way to Allah, he had to pass through hell, where he saw women hanging by their breasts through hooks. Now, I didn't write all of that. I just said that an understanding of the embarrassing nature of the Knight's Journey is a much more effective way of combating Islamic terrorism. What I'm saying is use words, not bombs. That is a very positive approach. It is a non-violent approach. It is the very thing that X and Facebook should be condoning. And yet the idiot computers at X said that I have to be sanctioned because that was hateful. It's hateful to say that words are more effective than bombs. According to X, Elon Musk, what in the hell's wrong with your computers? I mean, on a 1 to 10 scale of stupid, that's a 10. Can't your computers read? When we know they're incapable of thinking, I'm sure now I'm offending the circuitry of your computers too, and that probably is hateful as well. Is it not, Elon Musk? Get your act together. X is badly broken. You can't have a more positive post than what I presented, and for something that recommended words over bombs to be flagged as violent says that you've lost complete control of X. Now, let's turn to Facebook, who I had previously praised because there are very few existences of Facebook's computer and thought police running amok. Although we've had 2 in the last couple of months, and this most recent one was today. The single most important thing that Jews should have done and could have done to win the war of public opinion without having to fire so many bullets and drop so many bombs was to show what actually occurred on 10/7. It is exactly like memorializing what the Nazis did during the Holocaust. If you show what the Nazis did during the Holocaust, then people are less apt to embrace Nazism or to repeat the Holocaust. It is an exceedingly positive thing to do, to show all of the Jews that were rounded up and the hideous treatment that received by the Nazis. And exactly the same situation pertains to 10/7, to October 7th, when Muslims filmed themselves confessing to the crime, shouting Allahu Akbar, while perpetrating some of the most heinous acts in human history. To show it is to avoid more of it. To show it is to hold Islam responsible for what it motivated these Muslims to do. And so, Facebook, for you to say that revealing a post that has nothing in it other than the Muslims filming themselves as they perpetrated the heinous crimes of October 7th is promoting terrorism when it is exactly like showing what happened during the Holocaust to prevent more of it? How in the world have you guys built successful sites if the computers running your sites are this dim-witted? We can't pretend that there is artificial intelligence under these circumstances. So here I am telling you, Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, that what you have is badly broken. It is grossly immoral. You're exacerbating the problem. You're complicit in the crime when you deny such things. Having made my point, I'm going to return to Devarim and my commentary on it. And as we contemplate what Moshe revealed about the importance of listening to what Dowd has to say, what he has done for us, we find that Yahweh brought Dowd out of obscurity. He raised him above all Yisrael. He established him as the Messiah. He is the Ra, the Ben, and the Malek, the shepherd, the son, and king, as well as a profoundly important Nabi prophet. God placed his words in Dowd's mouth, evidence of which we find throughout his Mizmor and Mashal, as he sang them to us. God's beloved son followed in his father's footsteps, doing as Yahweh instructed. And because of this, God is expecting us to know what he wrote for us to read. His words, after all, define the relationship Yahweh wants to achieve with us. Moments before I came in here, before I was frustrated by the grotesquely immoral nature of X and Facebook. And by the way, YouTube has also banned the use of that video. Disgusting. All of you. You should be ashamed of yourselves. I was dealing with what was said about Hasatan, the adversary, in Isaiah 14. And heretofore, I had always sensed this to a significant degree, but had never seen it quite that blunt before. Satan doesn't actually say that he wants to be worshipped above God. What he says is he wants to rise above Elyon. Are you familiar with that use of that term? It's one that I've mentioned on these programs many times. It is one of the most startling realizations found in Dowd's song, the one his father Yahweh wrote on his behalf. The 89th Mizmor concludes by telling us that when Dowd returns with Yahweh, he will not only be as brilliant as the sun in God's presence, but he will be Elyon. Now, Elyon is a word that we can look at in a number of different ways. The on ending in Hebrew, like Shabbaton, for example, means all things pertaining to what preceded it. So it would be all things pertaining to El followed by a Yod. The Yod in Hebrew is a hand reaching down and out to us. It can be the hand of God or the hand of a man that Yahweh is using to influence his people and humankind. So Elyon is at its very heart all things pertaining to the hand of God. Elyon is Dod. So what does that mean when you put that together with what I've just shared with you? What it means is that Satan knows that he's not going to rise above Almighty God. He wants to rise above God's beloved. He's jealous. He wants to be Dod. He wants God's attention. He wants to be the Savior. He wants to be Dod. And what that means is that Christianity is, in fact, the magnus opus of Satan. It is Satan saying, me, me, me. I'm the Son of God. I'm the Messiah. That's what it's saying. Christianity is Satan's coming out parties. Christianity is the literal fulfillment of Isaiah 14. Of Satan replacing Elyon. He even says that he is going to be beyond the great luminaries. Yahweh has two of those as well. The greater luminary, his son Dod, who will return as brilliant as the sun. And the lesser luminary, who Yahweh says in the 89th Mizmor, right after telling us that Dod's going to return as Elyon, as brilliant as the sun, that the moon will remain remembered for the role that the moon has played in this regard. At lunch today, I said we were all laughing at me for the reference that Yahweh provided of the Palmoni. And I said, realistically, it's okay to laugh at it, because really, when you get down to it as the lesser luminary, my job is really pretty simple. There's Dod. Notice Dod. Pay attention to Dod. Let me reflect what Dod means in your life. Boil it all down, my job is to reflect Dod's brilliance, to reintroduce Dod to the world, and particularly to his people, as the true Messiah, as the true Son of God. And that means refuting the lies about Satan's caricature, his counterfeit, Jesus, so that Dod retains his rightful place. And so Satan has chosen not only Dod to replace, to etch out. That's why Dod is dead and buried in the Christian New Testament. That's why Dod is not in heaven in the Christian New Testament. That's why everything there is to know about the caricature of this Jesus individual, this myth, was either based on Dod, robbing Dod of his title, Son of God, robbing Dod of his title, Messiah, robbing Dod of his title, King, robbing Dod of his title, Chosen One, but also blending the resulting caricature with large amounts of Dionysus, so that the result could be perceived as a god, a man god, just like Dionysus, replete with a resurrection. It's why the symbol of Christianity is a dead Dod on a stick. Here, God, in your face. Here is your son, dead and tortured on a stick. It is Satan flipping God the bird. That's what Christianity is at its essence, as it is revealed in the 14th chapter of Isaiah. And then I become Satan's most hated, because I'm the one guy that's interfering with all of that, that's saying, no, that is a complete lie. It's an egregious falsification of reality. And over there, there's our King. There's God's Son. He is the one who was crucified as the Passover lamb, so that his nephesh soul could carry our guilt into Sheol, allowing us entry into God's family. I thought you should know those things. It is essential that we all come to realize and accept David's unique position, not only in our hearts, but what Yahweh perceives of him. Yahweh said that his love for David is greater than anyone else. He favors David more than anyone else. He chose David over all others. David is the one man he called his son. For you Christians to claim that myth was the Son of God, when God says his son is David, you're spitting in his face. You're calling God a liar. You're ripping from God the one thing he loves beyond all else, his son David. And then you steal David's title of Messiah. When God says 3 times, he is my Messiah, I anointed him. What more could you do to annoy God? Unless it is to erase his name. Unless it is to replace his name with the title of Satan, Lord. Unless it is to annul his Torah. Unless it is to replace his covenant. How many more despicable things can you do, Christian? Your religion is reprehensible. Nothing is more disgusting or annoying to God. Even Christianity or Islam, even as I should say Judaism or Islam, aren't as reprehensible as Christianity. God is sure, he says lots of horrible things about Judaism. He says, I want no part of it. I don't like any of their festivals. I don't like any of their sacrifices. I think they're absolute idiots. They erased my name, and as far as I'm concerned, they're destroyed because they're stupid. They are not my children. I'm divorcing them. I think they're annoying. God's not really fond of his people. That's true. And yet he still has something in him that tugs at his heart that says, I know one day they're going to return to me, and when they do, I will return to them. But Christians, the book of Shabat was revealed to openly expose and condemn Paul, the author of the Christian New Testament, the inventor of Jesus. He calls him the plague of death. Even Shabat is listening to God condemn Paul by name, and he says, wait a minute, you're showing me this stuff, and he's saying that you died? Wait a minute, God, you can't die. And yet all the little Jesus freaks out there, they're having too much fun condemning the woke Jesus Christ superstar as a evil-looking black woman whose long, menacing nails and bald head make her just look exceedingly weird. As if it's not fair to mock a fraud with a fraud. David has a unique position in Yahweh's story. The man who arose in year 3000 Yah opened the door to life in year 4000 Yah. And he will be returning in year 6000 Yah as our king. There are 3 men that have 3 lives in God's story. David lived just a little over 3,000 years ago, was anointed by Yahweh, blessed with the ultimate title of Son of God, became king of Israel, defended his people, united the nation, defeated their foremost enemies, acquired Jerusalem, acquired the Temple Mount, wrote 100 Psalms and Mizmor, or Psalms and Proverbs, Mizmor and Mashal. And during that first life, Dowd decided that it was in everyone's interest for him to serve as the Passover lamb and then fulfill matzah to sign our adoption papers on Bekurim. And he did, becoming a profoundly important prophet in the process, telling us all about it. And then in his second of 3 lives, as promised, he arrived exactly when he said he would, to do exactly what he promised to do, even being crucified as he had described 1,000 years in advance, telling us all about it. And yet no one listened. And he will return as our king. 3 lives. Eliah is the second. Eliah, after doing something that was profoundly important, he was the most aggressive and sarcastic and denouncing the religion and politics of Israel. And then performing as master of ceremonies over the roasting of what was a metaphor symbolically of the Adamah Parah, the red heifer. And we know that God took him, and we know from the book of Malachi that he's coming back. That would be this opportunity for Eliah to have a second of 3 lives. But, you know, on that mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant, there is more than the bull's blood. There's also the blood of a goat. And so Eliah is going to have the great distinction of joining Dowd and myself as a sacrifice on behalf of the people of Israel, and he will shed his mortal body once again to become immortal in God's presence, his 3rd life. And then there's this fellow here, Yada, who, as the Zeroah and the Choter and the Nakar, is the herald of the Shabuah harvest, which we have now determined occurs exactly on Shabuah, a Shabbat, of June 11th, 2027, based upon the specific map that was provided in Daniel by the collective contributions of Gabriel, God's most capable and competent man, that would be Dowd, Michael, who is the one who is right about God, would be Yada, and Eliah, all telling you exactly when this harvest was going to occur. And so we know all of these things now, and we know that it is this Michael who is going to offer his life as he returns as one of the 2 witnesses. So his first life, you're listening to him. He'll be gone for a little over 3 years, removed on June 11th of 2027, returning on the 18th of April 2030 on Passover with Eliah to share what we have come to know about Yahowah for 1,000, well, actually it's 33 days later than that. The numbers are actually for the Torahless one of the Antichrist. It's for 3 full sessions of Moed Mikre and a half a session, so it's Pesach to Teruah. And then he will be slain by this corporeal manifestation of Satan, the Copper Con, as I refer to the Donald Dumpster, on Teruah in 2033. That's the 24th of September of that year. And That will be his second of 3 lives, and immediately thereafter his soul will rise for his third and final eternal life. And in that regard, he will return at the right hand of David, as David returns at the right hand of Yahweh. 3 men, 3 lives. Every member of the covenant family, besides these 3 men, will get 2 lives, the one that they have or are living now, and the one in forevermore with Yahweh as part of his covenant. Now, there is a way to have 2 lives and have it not work out real well. That means you can be someone like Peter, Paul, Luke, Akiba, Maimonides, Baal Shem Tov, Hadrian, Vespasian, Titus, Mao, Hitler, Stalin. And you will spend your eternity in Sheol, which means you will have a forever death. So that is the story that we need to recognize. And the fact of the matter is, God was very explicit here in Devarim 18:18, telling us that if you don't recognize what he has accomplished to overcome these problems through Dod, his beloved son, then he will not recognize you. And that is the moral of the story. It is why Yada Yahowah leads through observations to coming home, where Dod's Mashal and Mizmor are king. What follows may sound harsh, but these are words that the world needs to hear. They are directed principally at the likes of Peter and Paul, Akiba and Maimonides, Muhammad and Joseph Smith, giving us the means to identify and disregard false prophets. With absolute certainty, nevertheless, the person who proclaims a message on behalf of a deity, a Nabi, who deliberately oversteps their bounds and speaks arrogantly and presumptuously, defiantly concocting a rebellious scheme. Asher Zid, who has an inflated sense of self-worth, insolently demonstrating self-reliance while being insubordinate, who conceitedly pretends to know, insults others, and is disrespectful, displaying pride in the pursuit of personal recognition and acclaim while despising rivals, who intentionally are confrontational against that which is established, and therefore they're prone to rage. They seethe with anger. Not that anger is bad, so long as it is properly directed, but not in this case. Overbearing and rude while insolently promoting their plans, for the express purpose of conveying words under my reputation and designation, which I have not expressly appointed, taught, authorized, nor directed him. Lo shawa hu. I have not provided those instructions to him. I have not assigned, constituted, decreed, prescribed, or ordained this for him to convey or who speak in the names of additional or other gods. Then that prophet is actually deadly. Devarim, words, Deuteronomy 18:20. This is so very important that we get this right. God is saying there will be people who claim to be prophets. But if someone claims to be a prophet and they are actually deadly, there will be three things that you will be able to discern about them. Same thing true would be on the opposite side. If a person actually speaks for God, you will find that there are the opposite of these same three things that will be true about them. So, the most important two are at the end, but it warms up to that. It builds up to it. So, a person who proclaims a message on behalf of a deity. So, if you're not claiming to speak for God, you are automatically disqualified from this. If you are someone who is, for example, on X, as I have encountered so many of them, who are racist anti-Semites, and they speak on behalf of neo-Nazis or just despicable humans in the past. They're not a false prophet. They're a reprehensible human being, but they're not a false prophet. They may be disgusting, but they aren't deadly in this context. Now, if somebody makes a series of proclamations and they claim that Jesus is God, and they make a number of statements pertaining to said Jesus or Muhammad or Allah, and they claim they are speaking for God, then they would fall prey to this, particularly if they say that they are providing unique insights that they claim that God gave them. All right, so this is a test that you can apply, for example, to the book of Ezekiel or the book of Enoch or the book of Job or the book of Jonah. And if it doesn't pass all of this test, then no. Okay, so that's the first part. The person doesn't even qualify for the test unless they're claiming to be a prophet. They don't claim to be a prophet, the test doesn't apply to you. Now, if you claim to be a prophet because you found that God says you're a prophet, then not only does the test apply to you, but you pass the test based upon the very conclusion of the test. This is the thing that was one of two things that was the most reassuring to me as we approach this. If you do not claim to be a prophet until God says, oh, by the way, you're a prophet, I'm including you among the prophets, then by the very fact that you're responding to something that God said about you, then in fact, you pass the test and are exactly as God has said. All right, so the first thing that he says about this individual that it would be, or individuals who would be false, is, are they zid? Are they deliberately overstepping their bounds? And that really is it. If you are claiming to speak for God and God has not appointed you to speak for him, you are trespassing where you do not belong. That is what zid means. So in essence, this is really just one thing said three different ways. You are a false prophet if you are trespassing, if you are overstepping your bounds because you were not authorized to do this. That's what zed says. Trespass. You're on somebody else's property without their permission. Well, Yahweh's property happens to be speaking for him, speaking about the things that he cares about, his people, his Moed Mikre, his Bereth covenant, his beloved son Dod. So if you're not overstepping your bounds into turf that belongs to God without God's approval, then you're guilty. You're done. If you have God's approval, then you're not overstepping your bounds. You're not trespassing. You're a welcome guest. You're not pretending to know, you know. You're not being insubordinate. You're being subordinate. And in this entire process of getting to know and share what I have come to know about Yahowah, I am absolutely subordinate to God. In fact, I'm subordinate twice over. I'm also subordinate to Dode, who works for God. I view that as a very favorable situation. In fact, I would have it it doesn't matter if I would have it no other way, because this is God's way. And so if you're going to work for God, you need to accept his way, and not only accept it, but enjoy it, relish it, celebrate it. And I do, because I don't want Dode's responsibility. I don't want Yahowah's responsibility. I'd pick 1/1,000,000th in charge and have no responsibility. But that is not the way that Yahowah has chosen to work. And I'm happy to do what Yahowah wants done. So in this case, it's just the opposite. It is out of my deep respect for Yahowah. That is why the seventh of the 7 spirits of Yahowah that the Choter is given is a deep respect for Yahowah. It is the opposite of Zed. Being given the spirit of Yahowah is the opposite of Zed. Being disclosed as the Nakri by Dode's son, Solomon, during the dedication of the temple on the mount, during Towrah, is the opposite of Zed. It means I'm a welcome guest there. I've been invited back there. The second, this not really a second, it's continuation, it's expressing words, person talking. If you don't say anything, then you're not guilty. It doesn't matter what you think, if you don't share it, as they say, that it's better to be quiet and seem dumb than it is to open your mouth and remove all doubt. If you don't make stupid statements, then you're not guilty of this. Now, it's Miriam and Aaron were obviously screwed up in the mind long before they approached Moshe and demeaned his wife, and then claimed that they also spoke for God. You don't just start there. They had been talking behind his back. They had been conniving and this sort of thing. But until they opened their mouth before God and said this, God didn't respond. But when they opened their mouth and expressed that this was their intent to convey, they also spoke for God, boom. Immediately, God showed exactly how he responds. And what did he say? He said, no, you don't. And you know how I know you don't? Because I, as God, am responsible for choosing who speaks for me. And when somebody is speaking for me, they know it. Because I've told them so. And I've told you so. That's what he's saying right here. He said that if they express in words under my reputation and designation, claiming to speak for God. What did Paul do? He claimed to speak for God. He was God's authorized agent to the world, right? What did Muhammad claim? He was the messenger of God. That puts you as the bullseye of this, which I have not expressly appointed, taught, authorized, or directed him. Shawa, the primary, I'm not going to say definition, but when you look in a Hebrew English lexicon or dictionary, under the word Shawa, you will not find how I have rendered it here, and I'm consistent. Every time I see it, I render it the same way because I have examined the lexicons and come to this conclusion that Yahowah means to instruct, to appoint, to teach, to authorize, and direct. But if you look in the lexicons, the first word you're going to see is command. If it is not under the command of God to do this, then you're false. You're deadly. So what is the number one criterion for being a true prophet? Having God authorize you as such. If God says, I'm going to raise up the Nakri, observant foreigner. If God says, I'm going to imbue the Choter with my 7 spirits. If God says there will be a third Zeroah, cultivating the final harvest. If God says there is a man from Edom who is going to save many. If God says that the final sacrifice is going to be by the Adamah Parah, if he says that his beloved son has a Bashar herald, God, if you needle him enough about the God-forsaken platypus, he might even call you a Palmoni. But if there's thousands of references to the role that God's asked you to play, speaking for him, that goes as far as to say, when he speaks, you need to listen, and then you need to respond doing everything he says. If God goes that far to address this particular individual, then he is the very epitome of appointed, taught, authorized, and directed. So that's the key thing. Do we have evidence that God chose this individual, that God designated this individual? Well, we certainly know that from Moshe, don't we? Moshe walked up to God, and God said, hey, Moshe, come here. Knew him by name. Let's talk. Come on. Moshe, you, the old guy with the sheep. Come here. Oh, by the way, take off your shoes. Now sit down. Get comfortable. You know it. God comes to you, and you're living out in the boonies with your family, and he said, I want you to build a really big ship. He comes to you and says, yep, you're my guy. I want you to build this really big ship, and here's how you're going to build it, and this is what we're going to do with it, and this is why. Then you've got a really good idea that, God chose you to do this, right? If God introduces himself to you as you're walking out of Babylon and having left the religion and politics of the place, and says, hey, I want to show you this very wonderful country that I'm giving to you. And I want you to listen to me. We're going to talk about this covenant. And then you know for certain at that point, he chose you. He has designated you for this role. When Yahowah told Shamuel, we're going to go down, there's a fellow named Yeshe, and he's got some sons. I want you to go, and I'm going to tell you which of his sons, and you're going to anoint him. He's going to be my guy. And then when Yahowah said, nope, there's another one. And Dode arrives, and he says, that's the one. I chose him. My choice for him doesn't match the way that mankind goes about choosing people. I have a different criterion. He's my guy. Anoint him. At that point, Dode is God's choice, right? When Yirmiyah heard, I chose you before you were even born, You know you're that guy, don't you? When Miriam walked up to Moshe and challenged him and said, don't we also speak for God? That's what she didn't have. There was no place where God had said, Miriam, you also speak for me. Aaron, you also speak for me. All it said about Aaron is you're a blabbermouth. He's your blabbermouth brother. You want him to come along? So, bottom line is, if you're speaking for God and you're not authorized to do so, well, that would be the case with Paul now, wouldn't it? That would be the case with Muhammad now. Do you see Paul mentioned here in a favorable way? Because I sure as hell see him mentioned in a condemning way that says he's the plague of death. You see a reference to a Jesus anywhere? You see authorization for a Jesus? I sure as hell don't. You see any authorization for a Muhammad? Nope. But do you see an authorization for a Yada? All over the place. Even if occasionally God has fun with it all and calls him a sucker and a palmoni. That's part of the fun of it all. The last part of it is equally important. There have been very few men, and this I'm not being sexist here by saying men. Nabi was written in the masculine form. There have been very few men, and none, since Malachi 2,500 years ago, that have spoken in the name of Yahweh. And that is a criterion. When Paul wrote in the name of Iusu Christu and a Lord, he proved that he was a false prophet. Same thing would be true of his pals, Luke and Peter, the whole lot of them. When Muhammad spoke of a Ar-Rahman and a rabbi who he thought was a Lord and Allah, Allahu, Allahi, he proved that he was a false prophet and affirmed that he was deadly. There is only one person who has even exposed the false religions under Yahweh's name, who, when introducing his son back to his people, spoke to them as Yada Yahowah, knowing Yahweh. The first person to recognize, prove, and then proclaim Yahweh's name, and only Yahweh's name, is the person that Yahweh has chosen to speak to his people at this time. And so the test is really singular, isn't it? It all gets down to one thing. Did Yahweh authorize that person to speak for him? And if the answer is no, then they don't. They're a false prophet. Did they change Yahweh's name? Plague of death, that's a false prophet too. Do they speak in the name of gods like Jesus or Hashem or G-D or Adonai? Then that is a false prophet. Makes all the Talmud false, deadly. All the New Testament false, deadly. All of the Quran and Hadith false, deadly. Everything the church has had to say, false and deadly. There's no authorization for a church from Yahweh. No authorization for Christians. No authorization of a Christ or a Jesus. None. not in Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. So the test isn't about getting everything right. It's about being taught and directed by Yahweh. It is about being designated by Yahweh. It is about being invited into Yahweh's home to speak for him, about his home. Dabarim 18:20. That is one of the more important statements ever made, is it not? I wrote a lot about this. I don't think I need to share any of it with you because I think I have made this point clear by conveying exactly what God has said. And, keep in mind, Paul quoted Dionysus. It's difficult to kick against the goad during his so-called conversion experience. He admitted he was demon-possessed. He wrote the gospel to the Greek charities, known as the Graces in Rome. He spoke of an iousu Christou, which was completely bogus. Made a name up, pulling it from the air. These are all things that are essential for us to know. You would expect that if God is teaching someone, if he has authorized someone, that they're going to have profoundly important insights that are relevant to their time. You would expect that, for example, when the book of Daniel has been sealed such that no one has understood it for 2,600 years, that God's authorized designee will. And now you know he has. Well, there's also the acknowledgement of Yahweh's intent, his authorization throughout of this. God overtly called upon Moshe, and then he proved his prophetic credentials. In fact, God went so far with Moshe to tell him to assemble all of the children of Israel at the base of Mount Torah and give them 3 days to get all cleaned up and presentable. And that Yahweh was going to come down off the mountain, his brilliant light and his booming voice, and he was going to essentially stand beside Moshe and tell the children of Israel that this is my guy. I have chosen him. I am speaking to him. I have appointed him in this role. Fulfilling this very prophecy, pertaining to Moshe, showing us the way. What did the children of Israel do? Told God to shut up and go away. They never wanted to hear from him or see him again. So that left God in a position where at that point he would only speak to his people through a select number of chosen men. And therefore, because of the choice of the children of Israel never to hear God's voice again, never to have his presence near them again, God says, now it's rather important for you to recognize who is speaking for me and who is not. And so I'm just going to tell you, if they've trespassed because I didn't specifically invite them and appoint them and teach them, or because they didn't use my name, they're false. Telling you that the Zohar and the Talmud are complete rubbish. Telling us that the Christian New Testament is trash. Telling us that the Quran is garbage. That's what that means. If Yahowah is going to communicate a message to the world. It is going to be through an individual of his choice. That is the way that he has chosen to work since the Jews told him to shut up and go away, that they never wanted to see or hear from him again. Is exactly what he said he would do. And he has done this. Now over the past 3,450 years. There was a very, very long gap between Malachi and Yada. 2,500 of those years. But God knew what was be at stake. He knew that no one had ever, he knew that very few had listened to him previously. And he knew that his people were particularly obstinate. And he knew how difficult it was going to be to get their attention. And yet he knew that time was running out. And so he did more for one witness than he has done for all witnesses with the seven spirits of Yahowah. And collectively, we now have worked at this for 24 years. And we'll be at it for 32 before we're done. And then that's just the first phase. I didn't want this to be about me. I wanted it to be such that you would be able to know that the New Testament and the Zohar and the Talmud and the Quran were not inspired by God. They did not speak in Yahweh's name. There was no mention anywhere of them being authorized to do so. They were trespassing. But I can't get your attention unless you know the role that God has asked me to play on your behalf, or the fact that it is the single most discussed prophetic event of the end times, or the role this individual will play on your behalf. And this is because God set up this qualification. He's laying it out right here. He just finished talking about David. All of this, which says there be a prophet who will come from your midst like me, that Yahweh will put his words in his mouth, that he will raise up for you, that you need to listen to him, and that God's going to hold you accountable for what he has said and done. Speaking of only one man in all of human history that meets that criterion, David. And then he goes from that to telling you whom you can trust to do this. There he is. That's the one. It's Dode who is the Son of God. It is Dode who is the former and returning king. It is Dode who is the chosen one. It is Dode who is the Messiah. It is Dode who is our shepherd. It is Dode who is as brilliant as the sun. It is Dode who is Elyon, the mighty hand of God. And so Yahweh wanted you to know that you could trust what I am telling you on his behalf. And that is why one prophecy follows the other. So I thank you. We have reached the hour moment in this program. I have poured out my heart to you. I have put it on a platter. I have done everything I can do to get your attention because I know the consequence. God is going to hold his people accountable for what they have learned about and from what Dode has said and done. And at this point in time, other than those who are part of the covenant family, whom I speak for, No one else is acknowledging any of this or telling you the truth about it. And it is the only means into forevermore. I thank you for listening.